But yeah, welcome everyone to week 9. Today we are looking at running lean. You'll notice that this is, we've updated the title slightly. Shona mentioned last week that we were working off a lot of the feedback from week 7 when we were doing some activity in the latter half of that session. Today we are at Aberdeen, and we are going to be doing this session in 2 parts. We are turning things slightly upside down from our usual format. So we're going to be starting pretty sharply with a workshop from David, who's here in the room. We will have a little break, and then we'll move on to a panel, once again hosted by Shona. And David will be joining that panel, and we have Ewan and Rich who will be joining us online as well. And then we will be getting wrapped up at our usual time of about 20 to 5. So just to let you know who is coming along today. So got some more people popping in. Hi. No worries, thank you. Sorry, I'm feeling extra trying to juggle all the things happening at the moment. But so talking today, so we've got David Stewart, as I said, he's going to be leading the workshop looking at selling technology. He is the founder of Approve.io and a mobile app for security software. And then also joining, who will be coming along online, we've got Ewan, who is the CEO and co-founder of Willow, and then Rich, not sharing slides. Great. We'll pause. So it's just me able to see these. Great. That is only the second time we've done that during this whole course, so we'll allow it. I am sharing my whole desktop on purpose. Okay. It's great. It's all grand, everybody. It's week 9. Why would we have it figured out by now? Try and get rid of you there. Nope, it doesn't want to disappear. You might just have to double see yourself. Sorry, everyone. Cool. Sorry, this is the wrong slide. So that was the agenda that everybody missed. Now you can see the faces. So yeah, there's David, who's going to be taking over from me very shortly, and hopefully a little bit less chaotically than I am this afternoon. So then we've got Ewan, as I mentioned, CEO and co-founder of Willow, and then finally we've got Rich joining us also online, who's CEO and founder of Gig.ai. So I will just speed through this, as I've already taken a little bit of time getting settled today. But as always, we are recording the session. So if you do want to ask questions and you don't want to be in that recording, just let myself, Molly, or Nawal know, and we'll make sure we chop you out of that, but want you to feel very comfortable taking part while you are here. As always, hybrid setup. So we'll make sure that we have a microphone coming around in the room, we've got you being voices coming into the room from our speaker here as well, so you can all be nice and connected. And finally, we have workbook and resources that will be getting shared by Erin, who's looking after you online. And so I think people in the room are settled and onto the internet. There's also the Wi-Fi password on the desk there. And yes, I'm sure you've already seen there's plenty of code-based staff here with you today. And if you can, please just pop into your names on Zoom that you're at the One Tech Hub, so we don't try to put you into breakout rooms in that first activity. I think you're both familiar with the hub and know we have no fire alarms planned today and where the toilets are, but there's plenty of us here to help you if you need any help. So for people who are hybrid from their local hubs, joining at a watch party, I saw a couple of people, but I've now closed you, so I can't see exactly where you are. But as always, if you can just let us know if you are at a hub and there's other people there with you and you don't need put into the breakout rooms, because there will be some paired activities coming. And online only, Erin will be probably already greeting you and telling you all of this information anyway, but just if you've joined a little bit late, if you can pop your name and let us know if you're going to be taking part in those breakout activities. And please use the chat function. I think everybody in the room is logged on to Zoom as well, so we can all discuss with each other in the comments. And if for any reason you're needing to leave the session or if anything changes, Erin's there to help you online. And just again, so we have we'll have a number of opportunities for questions from David, for David, and also we'll have the panel with a Q&A later. You can either pop your questions into the Zoom chat, or you can pop your hand up and we'll be able to come to you when it's time. And in the room, just make sure that I come and give you a microphone or else you won't be heard online. Alrighty, we're almost there. So this is the digital workbook for today. I was supposed to remove that line that said you don't need it for more than just referencing, because it is largely referencing for today. There's going to be lots of discussion happening throughout David's workshop, and there's also some links to polls. We're going to trial out Menti again. We haven't given up just yet. And those QR codes are in the workbook, and Erin will also share them online. Alrighty, I think we are in good time despite slight chaos there.
Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm sure you'll tell us if you can't. So this session is about selling technology. So I appreciate the fact that we've got a group of diverse people interested, and maybe some more technical than others. This workshop is really trying to cover everybody who's based on a technology business, but you may or may not be a technologist. But if there's a technical element to the business, I think you'll still get quite a bit out of this. The idea of this is that it should be quite a practical session. So I'm hoping that you'll come away from the next couple of hours with some real ideas of things to try in the next selling meetings that you have. Remembering that selling is all kinds of things. So quite often you think of selling as being in front of a customer, trying to actually extract some money from them. But if you're trying to raise money, or if you're trying to get a grant, or if you're trying to win a competition for your startup, then you're still selling. So all of these kinds of meetings, you can benefit from the kind of things that I'm going to go through today. And I'll give you some indications of where I think you should try to customize the things that I'm going to talk about, so that actually they will fit more completely into your business. So who am I? I actually almost wore that shirt this morning, which would have been a bit embarrassing, but it didn't. So I'm an electronic engineer by background. I've worked in both software and hardware businesses. I've worked in corporates, mainly Silicon Valley-based companies, spending time in Silicon Valley, in parts of Europe, as well as here in Scotland. I've also worked in three different startups, two that were European operations of US startups, and then I started my own company, which was Approved.io, which amazingly enough was 20 years ago. And I stepped away from that company at the end of last year, which was entirely my decision, because I felt that it was time for somebody else to come in and bring new ideas and take it on to the next level. The company's still there. There's a website that I may well reference. You can go and have a look at it if you like. It's a good solid business. But the important thing probably about me is that I came from a very technical background, but migrated into initially technical support, and then into product marketing, then into sales before starting my own company. So what you see there is the sort of migration from a technical role into ultimately selling technical products. And what I've noticed over the years is that quite a lot of technologists or technically minded people find the selling part of the business quite uncomfortable, and often look for ways to pass it on to somebody else or outsource it. And so what I'm going to try and do today is give you a sense of the fact that not only are you capable of being the salesperson in your company, that actually you should be the salesperson in your company, at least for the first 5, 10, 20 sales, because you are the best qualified person to do it, even though you may not realize it. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to cover today. So first of all, I wanted to just get a sense of a few things, just to get an idea of where you are and what you think about sales. So I think we have a poll here that you can join in on. Just put in a word or several words that are what comes into your mind when you think about a salesperson. Just give me a word that would, and hopefully we'll get a nice little word cloud to come up and show us. That's pretty much exactly what I expected. So not a tremendous number of positive things that are being said there. And also when you look at things like, you quite often get people who say that this is something that you're kind of born, there are people you meet and you go, oh yeah, that person's a natural salesperson, which I don't believe either. And so particularly when you're talking about the kind of sales that we're talking about today, this is different. I mean, you have to think about the context of what you're selling. So for example, the kind of products that you guys are selling are quite difficult to sell. But if you're a barman in a pub in Aberdeen at 10:30 on a Friday night, you don't have any problem selling anything, right? So you can sell beer, wine, no problem. People don't even ask you the price. They walk up to you and you say to them, what do you want? And they tell you, you give it to them, and then you ask them for a certain amount of money. There's no negotiation, right? So that's a simple sale. Obviously, you're selling much more complicated things. But the point is that you wouldn't necessarily say the barman is a brilliant salesperson or is inquisitive or extrovert necessarily, but he can sell. And it's all about knowing the context in which you're operating. Okay, there's a second poll, which I can't remember.
Yes.
Sorry. Same kind of idea. I'm just looking for a single. Right. Okay. So I'm getting the idea that you've got a similar. So this is good. You are exactly the right kind of audience for what we're trying to do today. So you think that sales is something that's not. It's got a certain amount of dirt attached to it, and also you think that it's not necessarily something that you're very keen to do. So that's good. I mean, that's where we want to start off. So, oh, am I? Yeah.
Oh, saying that, I'm struggling.
Okay.
Oh, let's find your right slide again. Oh.
Okay, so there's a lot of words on this about the objective for today is to increase your revenue through implementation of a sales process. So there is going to be some theoretical stuff in this. I'm going to try to minimize the amount of theoretical stuff because it frankly is all a bit boring. You want to know how to make a difference to the way in which you approach the selling process. And I'll keep coming back to this. As far as I'm concerned, this is something that you own. You need to own it, and you should own it. And all we need to do is understand the principles of selling and what you need to do to make it happen. So the concept of selling is that it is just a process like anything else. I mean, all the things that you've been through, all the things that you've learned, all the skills that you have, just because you've understood a methodology and you've got a process that you follow. And selling is no different. It isn't something you're born with or not. You can learn it just like everybody else, particularly the kind of selling that you're doing. You should remember that people like to buy things. They don't particularly like the slimy salesman, but they do like to buy things that they genuinely think will make a difference to their lives. So that's the way to think about it in terms of how you can make their lives. If you can explain to them how you're going to make their lives easier or better, then they will buy things from you. So fundamentally, what makes a sale happen is when a need or a want from the customer meets a solution. And then I gave you the example of the barman. That's an easy one to imagine. But in order for that to work, you have to understand the prospect's context. So you'll hear me talk about this quite a lot this afternoon. Context, understanding the context of the potential customer that you're talking to. What is it that they care about? What is it that keeps them awake at night? And then matching what you have to show how that can solve that problem. So think about it this way. It's about what they want to buy, not about what you want to sell. Now, that may sound like the same language said differently, but it is a different mindset. So that's why when people talk about selling, they say you should listen more than you talk. And that's because you need to understand their context so that when you present your solution to them, you can present it to them using context that allows them to say, yeah, this is going to make my life easier. And it requires soft skills, requires people having conversations. And selling is quite often a conversation. It's not a pitch. It's not, I'm just going to come in and dump a whole lot of information on top of you and then walk away and wait for you to call me back and say, how much money do you want? It's not going to work that way. It will come, the sale will come as a result of a number of conversations that you'll have, a normal human interaction. It's not different from just chatting to people. Now, I'm not going to go through all this because we simply don't have time. I'm going to focus on some of these things more than others. But these are all of the bits and pieces that you need, and some of them require the same kinds of skills, which is why I've chosen not to go through all of these. But I do want to get to some of the practical things because I want to leave you with a sense of how you're going to handle sales meetings differently from today onwards. So we're going to a number of these. Just touching on outbound and inbound for a moment. Now, this is something that in the last 20 years has changed quite a lot. The picture of the washing machine is to remind me to tell you that to compare buying a washing machine in the 1990s to buying a washing machine now, just to kind of show you the difference between outbound and inbound. So outbound is when you go to a customer and say, I think this is something that would be good for you. And then you actually have an interaction and you sit down face to face and you go through all of the pluses and minuses of your solution. So this might be, so in the 1990s, if you were buying a washing machine, most of you were probably at school then, but I was buying washing machines then. And you went to a shop, not knowing very much about the price or what model you wanted. You go in and say, I'm interested in the washing machine. And a sales guy would take you around the shop and show you all the washing machines and give you all the features and tell you all the information about them, tell you the prices and so on. And ultimately, they would either convince you to buy one, or you would think, nah, I'm not quite there yet. You might go somewhere else, or you might defer the decision. So that's where you've got a need, but you don't have all the data, and you're just out there and somebody comes and gives you all the data and helps you to make a decision. Now, inbound is how you buy a washing machine now, which is you go online, you look at reviews, you get all the information yourself, you don't speak to another human being, and then you decide, this is the one I want, you order it, and it comes in 3 days' time. So you haven't talked to anyone at the company at all. As you think about that, and that's how most people interact now with companies. If you're lucky, you can go out and visit real prospects. And in the early stages of your company, if you can do that, you should, because that is a brilliant way to learn about the market. But you also have to recognize that most people, if they find your website at all, will do all the research they're going to do before they even talk to you. And maybe they won't talk to you at all. Maybe they'll decide that you're useless to them. You don't solve any of their problems, and you will never know anything about it. But the point is that if you ever come into their thought, or you come up as a Google search result, for example, they will go to your website. And what impression will they get when they go to your website is a very key question. We'll come back to this again in the future, but it's really important that your website has a customer journey in it. So how does the website help the customer buy from you? Because normally in the early stages of a startup, the website is just information. This is what we do, and this is how we do it. Well, you could argue they don't care how you do it. It's how you're going to solve a problem for them is the question, and how they're going to engage with you. If you have no social proof, meaning case studies and so on, they will assume you're a small company, and they may well walk away at that point. Social proof is so important. And the dynamic part of the website is blog entries, lots of updates. And if you do that, then eventually your organic SEO will start to improve, and you will appear in more searches, etc. So it's really important to think about both inbound and outbound, because in my experience of the recent years, most of the leads that we had in Approve came from inbound. So they made contact with us. They already knew a lot about us. They'd already done a lot of research. They were quite far into the funnel, the sales funnel. Now that means there's a lot of companies that came and had a look and probably went somewhere else, but they didn't speak to us. So don't assume that, you know, the website doesn't really matter that much. It does. Okay, so let's just go through the sales process and what it is. Now, what I'm going to suggest with this sales process is I'm going to give you an example. This is really an example of one. The concept you can take, and you should obviously adapt it to your own business. The reason for having a sales process is that you're trying to be able to have a consistent approach to your sales opportunities, and also be absolutely put the honesty hat on about where you actually are. It's very common in startups to have a situation where you're very optimistic about the sales prospects that you have. You're not really realistic. You think because you had a really great conversation with somebody that they're just about to buy, and they're not. There's a lot of stages. And what you'll see as we go through this is that it's actually quite difficult in this process to actually get over 50% probability. There's a lot of things that you have to do. So the percentages at the bottom of this slide are the different areas, and the percentages are useful for forecasting. So you basically say that anything that's any prospect you have who has a suspected need is a 10%, and I'm going to go through each one of these. And what you want to do is create gates or barriers that you have to get over before you can call this prospect a suspected need. Obviously, this is the first one. So if you've got a target market, if you've got a characteristic of a target customer, then once you've established that that target customer meets those criteria, then they would become a suspected need. That's the very bottom or very top of the funnel, I should say, lowest percentage. Now you want to actually have a discussion with that customer and talk about how XYZ is just the name of the company, so how your solutions would potentially meet a particular prospect's business goals. Now, as you see here, in order for you to do that, you have to know what the prospect's business goals are, which means you have to go and have a conversation, and you have to ask them and understand what it is that they're currently worrying about. And this is where preparation can come in, because you need to think about who those companies are and think about why they might be interested in you. And why they might be interested in you is not because you do X. It's not because of that. It's because they have problem Y. Again, it's about what they want to buy, not what you want to sell. So always try to think about the context of the customer. Okay, so also when you're going through this process, you do want to bring up money. Now, people don't like bringing up money. And we established why not, because the poll we did, it's all that, slimy sales stuff. But it's very useful at quite an early stage just to throw a number out there. You're having this conversation about, how, potentially you could solve this problem. Yeah, you just a throwaway comment. This is probably going to cost, we don't know yet, but we're still working on it, but it's probably going to cost between 5,000 and 10,000. Now, depending on the reaction you get from that, it will never kill a deal. Trust me, it will never kill a deal, but you'll get an idea of where you are by asking. Just put that in. You're not asking for a commitment. It's an off the cuff. You don't even need to, you just throw it away as a comment. If the customer says nothing, that's good. You're fine. Keep going, right? If they start objecting, then you have to then go, and we'll talk about objection handling later, but you need to explore why that was such a bad figure. But it won't kill the conversation. And that's why people don't bring up money, because they think it will kill the conversation, but it won't if it's done in the right way. At each stage, you have to confirm an agreement and agree the next step. That's an important, that's closing, if you like, closing at a certain stage and moving on to the next stage. At 50%, which is the first time, only deals from 50% up are usually that's your forecast. And at this point, you've reached the point where the customer has agreed that a particular offering seems to potentially meet the requirements that they have. Now you need to start asking about the process for buying. So how do they buy things? And this is amazing to me that, I talk to, quite a lot of, I do mentoring in TechScaler, but also in other programs. And I talk to a lot of companies where they tell me that their target market looks like this, and they tell me their business model looks like this. And I say, how does that target market typically buy products like this? And they don't know. So, I mean, depends on the company. If, for example, you're selling to the NHS will buy products in a certain way using a certain model. So if you're selling to the NHS, then you better know how they normally buy things. And that's how you better present your product to them. Because if you try and present it to them using a different model they've never used before, that's going to kill the conversation. So again, that's part of preparation. But also you have to understand who owns the budget and how the decision will be made. And that's important because as you get to the later stages of the sales process, you will be having a meeting with you will want to create a meeting with all the decision makers. If you're going to have a closing meeting to try to get the deal, then you need to make sure all the decision makers are there, because if all the decision makers are not there, what will happen is you'll get towards the end of the meeting and then they'll say, "How about we can't decide because Frank's not here." And you didn't know Frank needed to be there. But that's your fault, not theirs, because you didn't ask. So understanding how they buy things and who needs to be involved is a very important part of the process. And again, we're 75%, 90%, and then we're going to get to 100%. And you see that we're, probably you're thinking, but actually you're quite far, this deal's going to happen, isn't it? But it's still only at 90%. And that's because things can go wrong, and attention to detail when you're getting to the final part of the deal is very, very important. So, as I say, you need to look at this later on and go back through it and try to customize it towards your own particular process. But it is a very useful thing. And it also means if you have multiple people working on sales deals, that they're all following the same process. And when they say 50%, they mean all the same thing. I mentioned that typically I'd recommend 50% above is your forecast, and then everything else is the pipeline. Now, sales channels. Another thing that I see a lot with startups is they partner with people quite early on, usually big companies, and they get some deal where the partner puts their product on their website. If you do that too early, you haven't got a sales mechanism that works, because you've done it, and you've done it not just once, but 5 times, 10 times. Then there's, in my opinion, limited value in then putting together partnerships. Quite often people do partnerships because they say, well, if we get our product on, Amazon's marketplace, then millions of people would say, because millions of people use Amazon Marketplace. They do, but they're not going to be looking at your product because they've never heard of you. And if they do look at your product and they do go to your website and they see no social proof, they'll assume you're a small company that's never done anything. So get those first 5, 10, 20 customers first, get the social proof, then you can start thinking about partners. Reps and distributors, same sorts of things. Again, people sometimes go, oh, we need to get a distributor in all these interesting countries. And getting distributors to sign up is not difficult, but what they want is they want a shrink wrap product with a shrink wrap sales process, and you've shown them that it can be done, so they can go and replicate that in their own countries. So they're all good things to do, but not until you've got your basic process proved and you've got the social proof to say, here are my case studies, this actually works. In the meantime, you own it. That's the message. Okay, so what I wanted to do here was just spend a minute or two just allowing you to have a discussion in your groups, and give me some examples of what you see as the biggest sales-related challenges in your business. This is really just to help me make sure I, as much as possible, cover the kinds of things that you might see. So let's just take a couple of minutes to do that. That's okay.
So people online will get put into breakout rooms. So we'd say 4 minutes of discussion, then we're all back together.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so
Near the microphone, and we will be able to hear people online if they unmute as well.
Hi, Pete Preston here from Settlers. So where we're at now is we've done an app launch, and we're experiencing the flywheel effect. We need to create the app for users to come on, and for users to come onto the app, they need for the app to be of high level and of good engagement. And for us to do that, we need investment. For us to get investment, the investors need to see the partners who are paying us money for them to invest in. But for us to happen, we need the partners to come in. So we're going round and round in circles.
So
in
from
onboarding
a perspective, how would you categorize that problem?
No clue. Yeah, but what it is really is our models, our pathways for our monetization are quite a few, but we've decided to go with getting local partners. So what in effect we've done is create a platform where we are giving newcomers into the UK a chance to, for local businesses to partner with newcomers coming to the UK. But we're noticing that the businesses are not coming on because there are not enough users into the system. Okay. For us to get the users into the system, we need investment for CAC. And for us to get investment, they need to see the partner. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to try and solve that, but it's useful feedback. Do we have any other bits of interesting feedback? Or
I think there was Rick online. I don't know if you want to unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Maybe not. I'll so Rick says the biggest challenge. Oh, is okay. Sorry, Rick, you can try talking again now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Sorry, second time lucky. Rick Campbell from Fidgersoft. Yeah. Just to say for us, it's the chicken and egg scenario for social proof and sales. I mean, we we've had customers for 6 years and have never lost a customer, but some of our social proof is maybe not relevant to other sectors. So we deal with various ones, but we have Pentagon clearance for our software, which is we're very proud that we achieved that, but it seems irrelevant to other sectors that we're going for, like engineering. So that's been a challenge for us.
Okay, interesting. Any more?
Anybody in the room or anybody wanting to unmute themselves on Zoom? No, Alison doesn't look super keen.
That's okay. We can move on. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to ask a question, because both of those seem like they're things where it's hard to sell something for a monetary value to get the social proof that you need and the chicken and egg. What are your thoughts on offering early adopters free or very low cost trials or ways to work with you to get the social proof? Is that useful, or is undercutting your own price?
No, it's useful. So that is one of the things I was going to suggest, is that, so quite often I do see that where people are, the product's not quite there yet, but they have some early adopters who are using it, but they may or may not be paying money for it. So what I have seen be quite successful is, either, if you can do it, is to actually go to them and say, look, why don't you give us some money now, which will be licenses in the future, we'll pay for licenses in the future, but in addition to the licenses in the future, you will get influence now, you will get the product to look exactly the way you want it to look, because you'll be our early adopter. So continue to give us feedback, continue to influence what we're doing, and when we come out with the final product, at that point, you've already bought 5 licenses or whatever it is. And so you kind of buy them in, you tie them in, but you actually get some money up front as well. So, and I think you quite often find that people just don't ask. They just, and of course, if you don't ask, they will continue to take your product and use it for nothing, right? Why would they not? They're not going to volunteer money to you, but you have to ask. And again, if they say no, it won't destroy the relationship if you do it in the right way. You're not going in with a gun and saying, if you don't give me the money, then you're not getting the product anymore. You're just suggesting that this would be a nice partnership thing to do, and you're explaining the value that they would get from that upfront payment. And if they say, no, I can't do that, then okay. And then you have to decide if you want to continue working with them or not, and you probably do. So even if they give you no money, what you can say, well, look, I'm happy for you to continue using our product, but I want you to be a public testimonial for us. That's not an unreasonable request. And so I think there are ways to do this, but it is always more important to get the customers, to get people using your products, and to get some money out of them somehow. The danger with just getting low amounts of revenue is that when you start talking to investors, they'll be skeptical about whether you can get the higher revenue that you're saying. But that's a nice problem to have, because at least you've got customers and they are paying something. Okay, so that's better than having no customers and nobody's paying you anything. That's a worse situation. So you have to always look at it that way. And in terms of the other question about social proof, I mean, obviously social proof should tie into your target markets. I mean, I'd need to understand a lot more about the business. It seems slightly strange to me that you've got social proof for markets that aren't core to the place you're trying to go. So, and that's not a criticism. I'm just puzzled by that. So if it was, I'd be interested in understanding a bit more about that, because normally social proof and early adopter customers are exactly the kind of customers that you ultimately want to go into the mainstream market for. Therefore, social proof works quite well.
Sorry, I was just going to say there's a follow-up from Rick online, but I don't know if I cut you off there, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So Rick's saying, we have a free trial, self-service automated, Azure, is that how you say that, onboarding?
Yeah.
Our early adopters have all stuck with us and are all paying customers now without exception.
That's all good.
Nice.
Yep. Okay, let's move on. That's it. Okay, so I mentioned this before, future work. Take the sales process as described here and try to map it to your business. Think about the different percentages, think about the actual gates that you'd want to go through to go from one percentage to the next and how that would work within your business. The one I've given you is quite tech and heavy. So it's 100,000 to £1 million type deals. I've used that process. So you might want something a bit lighter, but it's a very useful exercise to go through because it allows you to make sure you're not spending all your time on 10% opportunities, right? Make sure you're spending the time on the right opportunities. Okay, so now we're going to talk about best practice of actual selling. When you get into the situation, when you're doing a presentation, a meeting, etc., and prepare, listen, and close. And these are the 3 steps we're going to go through. And you should be, as you listen to this, you should be imagining yourself in these positions doing this work, because after all, you do own it. Preparation of the 3, I was going to say preparation is most important. I'm not sure, but it's pretty important. And it's the one, it is the one that people tend not to do. You kind of go, well, I know my stuff. I know what we do. I live and breathe it every day. I don't need to prepare for a meeting. I'm going to see these people. I'm going to pitch my product. I'm going to try and get them to buy it. So it's all good. But there's always reasons to prepare, if not to think about things from a customer's perspective. What are they expecting? What problems might they have? What kind of things could come up? And the thing I like to use, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else, is a great way. I think about that quite a lot. A great way to remind myself to think through what it is I'm trying to do, because every meeting doesn't result in a sale, but every meeting is not trying to close a sale. It might just be trying to move an opportunity from 25% to 50%. That doesn't involve a sale, but it does involve a close. So if you think the customers or prospects at 25%, you're trying to move them to 50%, what exactly is it that you need them to say or do before you can come out of the meeting and go, tick, they're now 50%. So that's the sort of thing where you need to think about what you're doing, what the meeting's about, and how you're going to get to that end point. Rehearsal is very important. Even though you've got your favorite pitch deck and you've now done it 25 times and you know it inside out, you dream about it, it's still worthwhile rehearsing, because the context of the customer that you're speaking to will be different in every case, even if your pitch is the same. And by the way, you don't want to sound like an automaton, because that's not very attractive. So thinking about how you're going to make it a bit different, thinking about how you're going to customize it towards that particular customer is really important. If you don't prepare, you might run out of time. You definitely won't be listening enough, because you'll be coming in thinking, right, I need to give them all this information about what we do and why it's so exciting. But you're not listening to what's the reason. You want to know why are they there? Why have they agreed to meet you? Because you asked them for a meeting. But that's not, I mean, they're not just nice people. They're not just meeting you because you asked. They're meeting you because they think there might be something in what you're going to talk about. But you need to find out what it is that they think you could potentially do for them. So that comes back to this idea of, remember, you're trying to find out what they want to buy, not what you want to sell. And if you don't prepare, you won't be able to adapt to things that happen. So imagine you're having a meeting, you've set it up. This is your big decision meeting. You've got everybody there. Even Frank has come to the meeting. So you've got everybody you need to make the decision. The meeting's set for an hour. You've rehearsed. You're all ready to go. You just do. You come into the room. Frank comes in. Frank says, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go after half an hour. So we've only got 30 minutes. and you haven't prepared for that. You haven't thought, just a mental exercise, if I had to cut some stuff out of my presentation, what would I cut? Just thinking about that before you go into a meeting gives you the confidence to know that you can adapt if that's what happens. And that sort of stuff does happen more often than you would like. So preparation, super important. You've got to research the prospect, the company, the people. Think about what they might be interested in, and then test stuff. We'll come back to testing the stuff, and you know, prepare with your colleagues as well. Think about the questions you might be asked, and be honest again about it. Think about the questions you really don't want to be asked, and prepare to answer them. Because preparing for easy questions is not very helpful. So get people to join in and help you prepare. And like I said as well, you know, think about the meeting before you have it, or the call. Now, when you get, just before you go, you've got all this stuff prepared. Then you're thinking about closing as well. Remember, every meeting has a close. Even if it's not asking for a purchase order, it's still got a close, because you want to take the prospect to the next stage. You've got to know what that close is. What is it you want them to say? What is it you want them to agree to in order to move the thing to the next stage? And think about things they might say to object to that. Things they might do to stall it. So if Frank hasn't turned up, that's a classic stall. We can't make the decision because Frank's not here. So there, you've missed that opportunity. Now, I'm not saying if Frank doesn't turn up, you should just say, well, I'm not having the meeting, I'm going to go. That would be ballsy, but possibly not that helpful. So, but you've adapted then. You think, okay, so I've not got all the decision makers here. So what can I achieve from this meeting? What kind of buy-in could I get? Would it make sense for me to, because they'll say, oh, we'll bring Frank up to speed. You don't want that. You do not want them bringing Frank up to speed. You need to speak to Frank yourself, right? So if they give you that, we'll bring Frank up to speed thing, not having that. In a nice way, could you help me get a meeting with Frank next week? I'll come in and just meet Frank, and we'll go through this material as well. You come along as well. You make them part of the solution of getting in front of Frank, right? So you need to be in control of these situations. Quite often we get, you know, sometimes you might feel they're in control. There's 6 of them, there's only 1 of you, right? But you need to put yourself out there a bit more and say, no, I'm not going to have that. You don't ever say that, but you know, you just think to yourself, no, I think I need to be a bit more assertive at this point. So during the meeting, even though you've confirmed everything beforehand, you should reconfirm it. Are we all okay for an hour? Now, Frank might have turned up, but he hasn't told you he needs to leave after 30 minutes. He hasn't told you that. The last example I gave you was he came into the room and told you, but he might not. He might come in and he might not say anything. And then you're halfway through your pitch and he gets up and leaves. Says, sorry, I have to go now. So that's why once everybody's there, you reconfirm that everybody's available for an hour. He will not say, I'm available for an hour, and then stand up after half an hour and say, I have to go now. He won't do that. So you need to, it's a conversation, as I said, so you need to ask questions about their business and think about what might be relevant. Show that you know their market, you know enough about their market. You might say, I don't know, an example might be, I've seen there's a new regulation coming in your sector. I'd imagine that new regulation is going to put a burden on your production processes. Is that right? Now, they may turn around and go, no, that won't really have any effect on us, but you still made a positive impression because you've shown that you're interested in their business and you're interested in the market and you've done a bit of research. If you're lucky, they'll go, yeah, that's a huge problem for us. And you already know that your solution can help with that. If they say something and you're not quite sure exactly what it means, then you absolutely must ask. Don't come away confused. Did they really mean that when they said that? I didn't understand what they meant, but I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was talking about when they said that regulation is going to mean such and such, and I didn't really understand that. You ask them. It's okay to ask. I don't just for my education, what's the connection between that regulation and this? Make sure that you get as much information about their business as possible. And of course, you've got to watch your time. And that's why timing a presentation based on your slides is a disaster area waiting to happen, because you've left no time for questions, no time for you to ask questions, no time for listening, and you're just blasting through all these slides. So your slide presentation should be, I don't know, half to 60% of the time. It shouldn't be longer than that, because otherwise you're going to run out of time. And you need the time at the end to get the closure you want. How many times have I heard, some guys been to a potential customer and come out and said the meeting was great? What happened? It was an hour meeting and it went on for an hour and a half. And he thought that was good. I said, that's not good. What was the closure? Nothing, just wanted to ask me lots of questions about stuff. I said, well, all you did was educate them for an hour and a half. You didn't find out anything about their business. There's no follow-up action. And if you're talking to people who've got an extra half hour, just like that, then I wonder how important those people actually are. So time is important, and it's important that you respect their time so that you finish on time. You're not asking them to stay another half an hour because you've overrun. That's actually rude. Because if they've got another meeting to go to, that means they have to be rude to you and say, sorry, I have to go now. So if they've agreed to an hour, it's your responsibility to manage that hour. And afterwards, you send them an email, thank them, confirm everything in writing, confirm what the closure agreement was. I went to sales training. I went on a sales training years ago, and we had to do this as a role play. And I went through all the difficult stuff, the value propositions. I got to the end and I said, so we'll put together a proposal for you and we'll meet to discuss that proposal. Do you agree to that? And the person said, yeah. I said, great, shook hands. The guy who was facilitating the workshop, he said, when's your meeting? And I went, didn't ask for a date and a time. I just asked for a meeting and was agreed there would be a meeting at some random point in the future. Be specific about what the objectives are, what the next step is. It's a meeting. We're all here. Let's get the diaries out. Let's get the meeting in the diary so we know exactly when it's going to be. You will not get all these people back. And you know how flaky Frank is. So you're never going to get these people back again. So you must take advantage of the time you have. So presentation skills. Probably a lot of you have been in presentation skills courses. I'm not going to go into this in a lot of information except to make a couple of points. One is this kind of presentation is persuasive. And it's some of the presentation skills that people are used to doing are informative ones, like if you're a teacher, if you're an academic, you're giving information to an audience. This is different. You're trying to persuade somebody to do something, agree to the next step. It's a different kind of presentation. So it's important to think about it in those terms. It's not about you telling them all about how smart you are. It's about you persuading them that they need to be working with you, and that's a slightly different pitch. So obviously, you want to be entertaining, not quite, stand-up comedy, but you want to be a bit memorable. You want to say things that people remember that are a bit different. So it's not just about information. Try to connect what you're saying to the problems that your audience has. keep things simple. For example, there was a trend for people to use kind of TED Talk type presentations where you're talking away and you've just got some random graphic up on the screen, which is all very cool and all the rest of it. But quite often you do slide sets, you give them to customers, they get circulated within an organization. You have to think about that when you create your presentation. Is it clear to somebody who wasn't in the room? If it's a TED Talk style, it won't be. It'll be a bunch of graphics that they'll go, what the hell was that about? It's a different setting. And most of the situations you will find yourself in, you'll be probably asked for the slides. They will be circulated to people who weren't at the meeting. So you have to think about that and make sure everything is clear. So try to follow a logical argument. So you're trying to, show that you've got, you're going through building value. I mean, you can do things like, one of the challenges a lot of the companies that you guys are setting up will have is you're small. And you're trying to hide that to an extent. And some people think that it can be an advantage. You can work with us because we're really small and we'll give you great support. Well, yeah, you can get some early adopter people like that. But if you're really trying to sell to big companies, they don't want to know that you're only 2 people in a garage. They want to know you're much bigger than that. And I'm not suggesting you lie to them. I'm suggesting you give an impression. So for example, you're in the middle of your presentation and you're saying, our software runs in the cloud. We run in AWS, we run in Azure, we run in Google Cloud. And you might say, so which cloud provider do you guys use? That's quite a good question, because now you're going to get some information from them that might be relevant. And they say, we use Google. You can then say, yeah, we've got quite a few customers that use Google. And you just move on. Now, the impression you just gave there was you're interested in their business and you've got other customers that are using the platform that they will probably use. So that makes them feel good, right? Another one, which I love using this one, is on your website, you've probably got a contact us button or something. So when somebody hits that button to say, yeah, get in touch with me, somebody will pick up that incoming inquiry and somebody will respond to it. When they respond to it, what title, if any, do they have on the email that goes out to that customer? You don't have to answer that question, just think about it. If you work at Intel and you contact this company that you think looks quite interesting, and half an hour after you hit the contact me button, you get an email from their CEO, what does that tell you? Tiny company. All you have to do is remove the signature from the email, right? At Approve, I was a sales guy for most of the years I was there. I never, ever sent an email with my title. I had customers that I had for years who did not know that I was the CEO. Some of them found it out, but most of them didn't. They don't care. I mean, they're just dealing with a human being, right? And they're happy that you're looking after them. So small things like that, you have to think about the impression that you're giving about your company as well. Okay, virtual meetings are tough. I mean, virtual meetings are more common now than they used to be, and they are tough. But all the same rules apply. It's just that you have to think about it a little bit more and try to stay engaged with your audience. Obviously, we're trying to do that with our activities and polls and things today. But it is important to try to find reasons to engage with the audience. So the example I just gave you about the cloud providers is a good way to just get certain point through the presentation and then ask them a question, just so you can see, that people are with you. Because otherwise you're sitting at home with your laptop, all you're doing is looking at your slides, just like I am here, and there could be nobody there for all you know. So you need reasons to engage with people. And going off message, just telling a story is really good. You should do that too, because that makes them see, oh, there's more stuff than just what's on the slides. Because the danger you get is, well, the guy will send the slides anyway. So if I just do some email, I don't need to pay attention but if they see that you're telling a story and you're talking about stuff that's not on the slides, then they go, okay, I'm going to have to pay attention to this. So, going off and telling a story is planned. It's not an accident. It's not that you got distracted and you went down a path. You should have some things that you talk about which are not on the slides. Okay, so think about meetings that you've had with investors, salespeople, investors, prospects, etc., and think about things that have happened during the meetings, objections, things that you've found very difficult when you've been having those kind of meetings. And we just split up into our groups again and have a wee chat about that for 2-3 minutes. That'd be great.
Okay. If Erin is ready to open up online, and we can just get back into the same groups for a couple of minutes just now. Okay, I think that is everybody back on Zoom. Lots of conversations happening in the room as well. All right, I think we're good.
All right. Anything interesting come up from that?
Zoom, who would like to unmute?
I can. We were saying not having the right people in the room or discovering that someone who had. Oh,
Shona is suggesting that Julie. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can, Julie.
Oh, hi. We were just saying that when you've not got the right people in the room or on the call, or you discover that you do have the right people, and then there's a procurement process that involves some other like unknown procurement person that isn't really interested in finding out what you do, they're just going to say no.
Okay.
We're also talking about the awkward virtual call when you've got not everyone that's there yet. People are running late and you're all just kind of sitting, looking at each other, coming up with things to say. Can be quite fun, but it can also just be like, oh, all right, just wait on mute until everyone's here.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good one where you can explore. You should have some questions that you want to ask them, just that are just curious, not key to the presentation, but actually quite important to you. But just, yeah, I was curious. I was looking at your website and I saw this, and how do you guys handle that? And so I think you can effectively use that time as listening time. Even if you don't have all the people there'll be some people there that can probably give you a comment on that. So I think it's important not to have that awkward time. I know exactly what you mean, and it's not great. Yeah, the trying to get the thing closed when you don't have the right people, or suddenly you get blindsided a bit by understanding that there's a procurement process that you didn't know about, or that has to be handled separately. Again, I think is generally part of your research to understand what the process is and who needs to be involved. And even if it's a multi-step process, so you can get a decision in principle from the operating team, if you like, and then it goes to procurement. I mean, it would be natural to understand how often what does procurement do? What is their role? Can they say no, or are they just negotiating terms and money? Generally, at least in my experience, generally procurement can be a serious pain in the arse, but they usually are not empowered to say no. They're only empowered to be Alan Sugar and get the best possible deal possible for the company. That is their role. So that allows you always to go back to the operating team if the procurement people are being difficult and say, look, I can't get this deal through, this thing you want and we've agreed you want and you need. I can't get this thing through because these people, think they're ace negotiators. So can you help me? Is something that I've done before. But yeah, procurement, if procurement can truly say no, that's a bit more difficult because you're going to have to go and sell them. Okay, we're running a bit behind, so if I can get this to work. So we did best practice. This is best practice, so you better practice these things. And these are the soft skills. So some of the stuff we've already talked about, which will allow me to speed up a bit in what you need to do. So managing the customer means managing the customer through the whole process. So what is it you're going to do? You have to build a relationship with people because people are going to, people buy from people. My favorite example of this was a lunch conversation I had with a potential customer many years ago, where the guy was telling me, don't know how, I can't remember how it came up, that he was a Morris dancer, and not something I know anything about. So he just threw that comment away, and 3 months later, I went back to see him. He met me in reception as we were walking to the meeting room, and he's quite a calm guy. And I said to him, how's the Morris dancing going, or something like that. And the guy just lit up. He was so happy to talk about Morris dancing because that was his thing. And that, it gave me an edge because he thought, this guy's remembered. I mean, when I was a technical support person, I used to work with salespeople who couldn't remember the customers' names. I mean, and I had to tell them, we're going in to see Frank. And so remembering things about it is really, really important. Trying to make a connection without being creepy, trying to make a connection with people is really, really important, because that will be a differentiator. And you're thinking about how to be different. And you think about how to be different only in the context of the offering that you have, but you can also be different in terms of a human being, because they kind of connect with you in a way. They think that they see that you really, care about what you're doing, and those skills come through. You need an internal champion. In my case, the Morris dancer was my internal champion. But you need somebody who's talking about you when you're not there. Because if you think about the percentage of the working time when you're actually interacting with a customer, it's tiny. So you need to have one or two people who are talking about you when you're not there. So when they're having internal meetings, they are, there's one guy, at least one guy there who's saying, oh yeah, we saw those guys last week. Would they not fit into this project? That sort of thing. So you need your internal champion. If you're a technologist, quite often technologists drop into I sent them an email as a way of, have you done anything with this particular prospect? Yeah, I sent them an email. And then I sent them another email saying, you haven't answered my first email yet. And you feel like you've made progress. Yep, I can take that off my to-do list because I sent a reminder email. Well, the reminder email is going to get the same response as the first email. But it is important to recognize that you do have to be persistent, but you have to be persistent in an engaging way. So sending another email saying, you haven't answered my first email is not being very engaging. It's actually quite annoying. So you suddenly see an article on a website that is somewhat relevant to the discussion that you had. Oh, I saw this article. I thought you might be interested in it. And by the way, I'm waiting for you to get back to me on this information. So you're showing that you're interested in their business. You're not just wanting an answer to an email. So email's a problem. And if you can pick up the phone, actually call somebody, amazing. It actually works. So that's another thing. It's easy to send an email because you don't have to speak to a human being, but speaking to human beings are what you need to sell stuff. So sometimes mix it up. call people sometimes. Think personally, WIIFM, in the days when US radio stations had FMs on the end, which I don't think they do anymore. This was a sales training course, one of the very first sales training courses I went to in Silicon Valley, and the guy said, tune into WIIFM. What's in it for me? So you want to work out personally what's in it for your internal champion of working with you. If he works with you, he or she works with you and gets your thing, what will happen to them? Will they get a promotion? Will they get their own project? Will they be a hero? So it's a personal thing. It's not, what's best for the business. It's not that. It's what's best for that person themselves. So to try and think about that. And again, you've got to get to know somebody a bit before you can understand what would be in it for them. Okay, objection handling. People hate objection handling, but objections are good because objections show you that you're making progress. They're a buying signal because you're being challenged to remove the objection so that I can buy something. The person's saying to you, help me sell this internally. I know if I try and sell this internally, somebody's going to ask this question. So I'm going to ask you this question so that you can help me sell it internally. So don't take an objection as a negative. It can be a positive, but you've got to handle it correctly. So for example, there are all kinds of objections. You could be telling somebody about this wonderful software that you've written, and you think you're making good progress. You're in a room with 10 people, Frank's there, and somebody at the back of the room who said nothing so far, and they've looked very bored, they say, does your software run on a quantum computer? Right? And this is not relevant. I mean, your software runs on Windows and Linux. It doesn't run on quantum computers. It's not relevant. So,
Sorry, we've got a warning, the TV's going to turn on.
oh, right.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
So the point about that is when you get an objection, the first thing you should do is check your understanding. So you should ask the question back. Right, so you're curious to know whether the software runs on these new quantum computers. Have I got that right? Of course you know that, but you're asking because you're giving yourself some time to think, right? So the guy at the back of the room, and when he's asking, he's confirming, you're looking at the room and you will probably see one or two people going, that's that David guy at the back of the room. He always does this. So you know that he's a bit of an outlier. So what you do is you say, is anyone else interested in quantum computing? Because it is an interesting topic, but in the interest of time, if this is the only person who's interested in this, we can discuss it later on. Is that okay? And everybody will go, yeah, fine. It's him, So you have to find out whether this is a really important thing. Now, it could be it's very important, but you have to find that out. Because sometimes people just go, no. Because that's the truth. You don't know whether your software runs on a quantum computer or not. It's not relevant or hasn't been relevant up to this point. But it's not good to say no. Saying no is not good. It's what they always say. You should say yes, but not no. So explore the objection. The objection might be real. If it's real, you have to deal with it. So asking questions, don't just answer it. It's a great opportunity to find out more about the company. Somebody's asked a question. Great. Let's explore why that's an important question to them. Let's not just answer the question. I know what the answer is, but don't just answer it. Ask why that's important. Try and understand a bit more what's behind it. That will really help you with the sales process. So investigate the objection, as I mentioned. Answer it, and then confirm that that answer is okay. So I've answered your question. Does that deal with that issue? Because it's very important. Objections must be dealt with. You will never close a sales deal if there are still objections on the table. So you've got to confirm that that's dealt with. and you move on. And if at any point you feel that something's not right, so for example, you might get, well, we need to think about it. That's another classic. We need to think about it. Well, that means your argument's not completely compelling. That's what actually that means. So you need to then go back and say, okay, you need to sort of rewind the conversation to find out where you lost them. So you told me that this was an important topic to you. You told me that you wanted to reduce, your production waste by 20%, and that was critical to the success of your business. I've explained to you how I think we can do that. So when you're going to think about it, what is it you're going to be thinking about exactly? Help me understand what you're going to be thinking about. Don't just, when people say, we need to think about it, don't just accept that as that's the end of the meeting, they're going to think about it. Again, quite often people think that's a good outcome. It's great, they're going to think about it. They're not going to think about it. It means that your argument's not compelling. So you need to understand what it is they're going to be thinking about so that you can continue the conversation about that topic until you get rid of that. Okay, and final thing is closing the deal. So closing the deal is, and as I said at the beginning, every meeting you have has a close to it. Doesn't mean that it's actually asking for the purchase order. It might be, but it's just you've got to close with an action, an agreement that you've reached a certain stage and what's going to happen next. You can do trial closes, which are very interesting ways of finding out where you are. So, for example, you can be talking about your solution and you can say, so if you're going to do a trial for your whole team, we would hold a training course for you. Would we hold the training course in this room? And how many people would you put on it? And if they say, no idea, then it means you're not quite there yet. If they say, no, it would be this group, and yeah, we'd probably do it in here. That's good. They've already been thinking about that. Or you might try, do you want a red one or a blue one? You're selling tractors, right? Do you want a red tractor or a blue tractor? Green, okay, that's fine. But the point is, the customer's been thinking about it. They can imagine that tractor on their farm, whatever it is, so they've been thinking about it. So these are trial closes. So you're trying to get a sense of where they are in the process so that you know how much work you've got to do. Negotiating, I don't need to talk about negotiating much because you shouldn't be negotiating until you get to the very last stage. And if people try and negotiate price early on, don't do it, because you'll always have to do it again at the end. So whatever you give away the first time they talk about price, you're going to have to give away more at the end. So you just keep on talking about value, talk about results. Don't get into discussion about pricing. Just defer it. We can talk about pricing. If we get to that stage, we'll talk about pricing. Yeah, and we'll negotiate something. But don't do it until you get there. Is this the only thing that we need to agree on before you'll buy? Okay, if you get a yes to that, then by all means get into the price negotiation because they've told you they're going to buy, but not before. If they tell you they try and negotiate price before they've got to that point, I don't know what they're doing. They're playing games. So don't do it. Okay, I'm over my time. Want to skip this? Well, yeah, just looking, so thinking about you owning sales in your company, what single word describes how you feel about it now? I'm hoping there'll be a bit more of a positive feeling about it now. That was where I was hoping to get to with this. So I'll let you do that. And then in terms of future work, I think that it'd be great. Think about the next sales or persuasive meeting you're going to have. Doesn't need to be selling a product, but the next persuasive meeting, when you're going to go to a meeting and you're going to be thinking about trying to persuade that person to take a next step with you, whatever it is. and you can really go through the steps and think about the process of preparing and listening and closing, and see how you get on with that, see how it feels different. It should feel more like you're much more in control, and it has much more to do with soft skills than it does presentation skills. So I think I covered all these things enough where you should understand the different steps that you can go through. And I genuinely do think that you are the best salesperson for your company. And once you have a predictable shrink wrap sales process with some repeatable case study successes, then you'll be able to outsource it to other people, but not before. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. So we are going to be hearing a bit more from David in the panel shortly, but let's take the break just now, and let's come back at 42.
We've got volume. Yes, lovely. Okay, thank you for bearing with the change in camera angles. I'm going to try and speak to the camera, but I've also got Rich and Ewan behind me, so I'm sort of looking at you as you're speaking, but I will try and focus this way because it's a bit easier. I also don't have my glasses on today, so anything could happen and I might not see it anyway. But I have got the chat up at the side, which I'll try to keep an eye on. So if you're online, please do pop questions in the chat, but we'll also invite you to unmute. We're sort of used to this format now, me hosting a panel during one of our sessions. Today, I'm going to ask even fewer questions myself and open it up to the floor quite quickly. But just to introduce the concept of today, so the title of the session initially was Scaling Operations So You Can Run Lean. And then we had quite a lot of chat about sales being something that lots of people wanted a deeper dive into. So the way I'm framing this is that there's two ways that you can run lean or increase the gap between spend and income, and that's either bringing in new income, which was the sales section that we've just run at the start of this workshop, and the other is running lean internally, your operations and an operating model. A few themes that have come up in earlier panels during Next Steps have been in the week that we did around growing a team, money and funding, and the pivots, failures, and exits. And themes that came up around scaling your operations and running lean were hiring too quickly. Just because you had cash in the bank doesn't mean you need to spend it. Having too much SaaS and too many subscriptions that are burning your runway. Reducing burn, that came up last week during the money and funding section. Come on, Pete, join the panel. And then talking about increasing sales as well and using that as an efficient spend. So looking at how you can increase the opportunity of success per amount of hours spent on sales and your sales process. So those, just to give you an idea of the themes that have come up over the last few weeks that I've tried to pull together to think about in today's context. So what I'm going to do is run through intros to each of the panelists today. Thank you everyone for joining us. And then I'm going to go straight to questions from the floor. We've got a few, I think, follow-up questions from the audience. We've got a few follow-up ones from the sales piece that might come up, but would love people to think along those themes around hiring decisions, efficient spend, what does scaling operations but not scaling your team at the same rate look like, and how to run lean, thinking of those concepts as we move into the final stage of the program and as you exit Next Steps, thinking literally about what your next steps might be in terms of what you action out of the program. Because you could spend money on every single topic area that we've covered over the 9 weeks. So thank you to Ewan and Rich who are joining us online today. We've got David in the room with us here in Aberdeen, as mentioned. And Ewan and Rich, I think both are dialing in from Glasgow. So thank you for that. And Rich will be joining us in Glasgow next week for our showcase week as well. So I think David's run some intros already. So if we start on screen and then we'll come back to you after. So Ewan, would be great if you want to share with us who you are, what you do, and maybe your first initial thoughts about running lean.
Thank you. Thanks for having us as well. So yeah,
we can't hear you in the room.
What's that? Sorry. Hello.
Hang on a sec.
Hey, Ewan, they can't hear you in the room. We can only hear you online.
Okay.
So give us a second.
We can hear you now.
Got it. Can you hear me now? that okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, good. Well, thank you for having me. All good. So yeah, my name's Ewan. I co-founded a platform 4 years ago now, and it's a video interviewing platform. We started back in 2019 with a bunch of R&D and eventually came to market January 2020, just 3 months before COVID. So that was an interesting time to launch any business. And for us, actually, it ended up being a fortunate time to launch what we do. You know, video interviewing became mainstream throughout COVID. Organizations quite quickly realized that, hey, if we're going to continue trading during a pandemic and a lockdown, we need to continue hiring people. And a lot of organizations actually continued scaling and growing through that period as well. So Willow kind of found its feet throughout that period. It was quite a bumpy ride for everyone. We raised £3 million in that period. And each of those fundraisers had its own specific challenges. In 2020, we raised a small seed round or pre-seed round. 2021, we raised another pretty small round. And then 2022, we raised a significant amount more. But each of them had its own challenges, which I'm happy to share with anyone along the way. It was an interesting period for me. I've never done any fundraising or anything like that before until summer of 2020 during the pandemic. And it was all done over video as well. So it was quite an interesting experience for me and for the investors as well. One of our investors' first ever investments was Willow during the pandemic over video. So that was pretty cool. They'd always met all of their founders at least once to do their own sort of in-person due diligence. So that was pretty interesting. But yeah, today we've got a platform, over 1 million candidates a year interview on the Willow platform. Over 500,000 of them get a job every year. And we've just got over 600 employers around the world using the platform. Interestingly, in every country around the world as well. So all 196 countries, the platform is used. And I can share a bit about how that worked in terms of marketing and go-to-market strategy as well, if anyone's interested.
Really cool. I think we maybe it's a mutual investor that maybe we have the connection with, which is Mark Cohen, who he uses Willow to screen his investments. So I've pitched to him through your platform on his investment channel before. So I think that's where it came from, the connection as well. And I think if I understand right or remember right, you have just hired your first US sales rep or account manager, is that right? And we had an interesting chat during the growing your team session around that being an expensive mistake for one founder, but also being a valuable investment for another founder. So maybe we'll come on to that in a minute as well, as to how you spent and how you've gone into that bit, because I think that would be quite interesting. And amazing to have 196 countries represented, but all your team until now have been in the UK or focused in Scotland as well.
And remotely as well. Yeah, we've only just started working in person in the past 8 months. Up until that point, it was all remotely. I only met my co-founder actually in the first year twice, which is pretty strange as well, but quite cool.
Very cool. Thank you for being here today. And then Rich, do you want to share a little bit about your story so far as well, and where you are with Gigged at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Rich Wilson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Gigged AI. Quite a bit of background. I spent 15 years in enterprise sales, so I am not a tech founder. I am a sales guy, really. So any of the sales questions and comments, I'm happy to discuss any of that. So I work for major American firms. Never even been near a startup in my life. Barely knew what a startup was. I said I work for multi-billion-dollar companies, which is very, very different. From those experiences, I worked in recruitment for 12 years, and then I worked at Gartner for 3 years. And those experiences really helped shape the idea for Gigged. Gigged is technology for being able to help hire tech talent. We do that in 2 ways. We have an open talent platform that is able to hire project-based freelancers. Actually, how we built our full beta version was using people from our platform. We still use it massively as one of the ways we stay lean. So our open talent platform is a large part of what we do. And then we also have an enterprise SaaS product called the Internal Talent Marketplace. Not a sexy name, but it does what it says in the tin. It helps companies, big companies who are trying to reduce hiring spend, to be able to look at what skills they have internally before they hire externally. So our messaging is that we are there to help solve the tech skill shortage, but we do it through two very specific ways. We launched in July 2021 with a pretty belt and braces beta version. I say belt and braces, it was put together with sellotape and super glue, but it allowed us to build some traction. We closed our first round 3 months after that launch. So we raised a £800,000 round led by TechStart Ventures. I said just after 3 months after starting a company. We then were able to get support from Innovate UK and Scottish Enterprise. So we've raised about £300,000 of grant funding from them. We're on the high growth program for Scottish Enterprise. And then we've done a £2 million round. This time last year, I've just recovered from it now. And we raised 2 million to really help scale the company. We have stayed lean though. We've got most of that money still in the bank. We haven't went crazy. We've tried to be very focused. Similar to you, and we have grown fast. So we've got over 17,000 people on the platform. We've got 3,000 clients. We do a little bit of work in the US that we sell from here. I spend a lot of time in the US, but we sell it all from here. And at the moment, the majority of what we do is still UK, but the next big launch will be the US.
Amazing. Thanks for that intro. I hadn't quite, it sounds stupid, but hadn't quite connected the dots on how much recruitment and HR tech we had in the room. And also, I think online, we've got Richie, Mike, and then in the room, Roberto. It's all HR and recruit tech, possibly. So we've actually got some connected startups that might be able to.
That was a hotbed for HR tech now.
Yeah, I think we might have a theme running here. So I'd be quite keen to pick up like a HR tech Scotland thing.
I think we call it the HR tech mafia. Me and you have called it.
Yeah, exactly. And you've both raised a similar amount of money in a similar space of time-ish. What team sizes are you both operating at the moment?
12 here, so 12 full-time.
13.
Oh, okay. Very close. I love that. Oh, that's my phone and my water bottle just knocked over. And then David's coming a little bit in a different perspective today. So you've introduced yourself to the audience before, but in terms of running lean, 20 years heading up Approve and the team size and investment, what's the business story there for you?
Yeah, well, I'm an electronic engineer by background, but have spent quite a lot of time doing sales and marketing things for small and large Silicon Valley-based companies before starting Approve. And in 20 years, we were probably 4 different companies because we pivoted multiple times. That's a whole other story. As well as we raised, I think, about $15 million in that time. We also grew. We were 30 people at one time. We contracted as well. So we had probably one of the classic experiences of going through some level of growth and then having to cut back as we read what the market was telling us. We did have nowadays the company is focused on mobile app security, has been for the last 7 or 8 years, is a stable growing business now. And probably this is definitely as far as we've ever come in terms of market fit and customers all over the world. Actually, we all the products that we've developed, I don't think we've ever had any customers in Scotland. So we had some in the UK, but not in Scotland. So everything we've done is sell in Asia, in US, and mainland Europe. Again, doing most of it from here. Which isn't that easy, but it can be done, and so on.
Cool. And so you said 30 at the largest size for the business, and what was it when you sort of exited last year?
It was 12 at that time.
So we've got a really similar, and you're Glasgow based as well for that
company. I live in Glasgow, but the company was based in Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. Okay, so we've definitely got a bit of a hub there. Okay, so we're on similar company size in terms of team, so 12 and 13. And in terms of investment recently, it's 3 million in the last 3 years, and Rich, it's 2.8 in equity by the sounds of it, and 300,000 in grants, so about the same. Are any of you willing to share the ARR that you have that compares to that? So what revenue are you looking at for a team size of roughly 12 with 3 million investment, and maybe you've had a bit more, but who wants to share some numbers?
Sure, happy to. We just passed 1 million ARR.
Ooh, which is 83,333 per month if anyone is tracking their 1 million target. Yeah. Excellent, congratulations.
That was
Rich?
that was a big milestone for us. We're using it to actually increase the team size. So that was a milestone. Once we check that off the list, we can then raise more money in future a little bit easier because we've reached that milestone, but also we'll be profitable next year. So the idea is let's reinvest that into a new team. So team will be increasing by 5 more heads next year.
So you're looking at break even as your next target then?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, January is the target.
January, excellent. Okay, and what's the gap at the moment? What does that look like?
So we're basically burning like 10 to 15K a month. So it's a very small burn rate.
Yeah.
The idea is December is not a great month, obviously, for most businesses. So get past December, and then that 10K burn should be gone completely, which is cool. And then we'll go back into burning for a bit next year when we increase that team. So Q1, we'll have some more heads. It's going to be product engineers that we're going to be hiring more of.
Okay.
Go back to your lean topic. We've only got one engineering team at the moment, so one squad, and it's a very lean squad. There's 4 of them on that team. So like 1 back-end engineer, 2 front-end engineers, and then a QA. And the idea is to double that. You can only really do 1 feature or whatever at a time with a squad of that size. So it's fairly limited in terms of what roadmap you can do. So by having two product teams, we'll be able to do 2 features at one time or whatever, and run 2 product streams at the same time, which would be pretty cool for us.
Ace, and we'll come on to that US hire maybe next as well. I'd be quite interested. But Rich, are you able to share some numbers in comparison?
Yeah, sure.
To that?
Sure, business is a marketplace, so it's not, we don't work in an ARR perspective. It is mainly a traditional marketplace, so pay a fee on sales. This year we'll do 1.2 million by the skin of our teeth. And then next year the target is to double that at 2.5. And we'll look to try and probably sneak in a Series A raise next year, if we can. It'll depend, but that is the plan at this moment in time. Depends what market conditions are like next year. If the market's still looking dodgy, then we will just continue as we are. But you know, we've got some big US incumbents, so for us, it's all been about moving quick and growing as fast as we can.
Thank you. In terms of the 1.2 million, is that your cut on it, or is it money flow?
Yeah, that's total cut. That's our
total
cut.
revenue to you. Okay.
More than that, yeah.
So the question from Erin there, what's ARR is annual recurring revenue, which is often the SaaS metric, and your monthly recurring revenue being MRR is your SaaS metric for revenue, essentially. And then when you're looking
build more into a SaaS, you know, we're looking to grow. One of the big learns from us has been this year has been much more enterprise concentration than we expected. So our initial was mid-market. That was really SMB mid-market was really our target market. What we've realized this year is that 70% of that revenue was enterprise. So we're really going to make sure that we've now got a product that enterprises can buy on a recurring revenue model. That was something we weren't planning to do, but just customers talking to them, that's what they're wanting. So we're going to, you know, that's launching in the 1st of December. We've already sold a few, but we're launching that to then make sure we want to have 2 lines of business. We want to have the kind of fee marketplace, because that's pretty lucrative when it grows, but it is obviously very up and down. So can we then have the more of the stable recurring revenue model? So we're going to really try 2 go-to-markets, really.
Great, thank you. So for marketplace revenue models, for those that haven't been operating those, obviously the one side, the buyer makes a transaction on the site with the seller and you take a cut, but sometimes when you're tracking your revenue, overall revenue or turnover, you'd be tracking how much money flows through your site, and then what you track as your revenue is the cut that you keep, because you will be processing all of those transactions. And that's where I think I might have mentioned last week how much Stripe used to not be set up for UK VAT, and that used to be the most painful thing I did every month. And then David, in terms of revenue versus team size, what sort of numbers were you looking at last year?
When I stepped back from the company in 22, we were doing about $1 million in ARR.
Yeah.
And with a little bit of burn, I don't remember how much it was, but it was a little bit of burn every month. So we weren't quite profitable. We were profitable some months, but not others. But we were exactly at that point of, you know, when you're thinking, do we invest and increase our lack of profitability by hiring some more people, or spending some more marketing dollars, or do we just keep working on what we're doing but trying to reduce that monthly burn? So that was for the last couple of years. That was quite a battle internally about how we're going to do this, which I guess is what you want to talk about.
Yeah, that's the perfect topic for today. So I really appreciate everyone showing the numbers, because not everyone is always, for lots of reasons, people keep some of those business metrics close to chest. But for you all to see, actually, all those numbers are quite consistent. Like when you look at revenue to the business, team size, investment raised, and what you're working on in your projections. And it might be that it might sound like those team sizes are quite small, I guess, to people when you think about having raised 3 million, having 1 million turnover or revenue. Like that might feel not quite what you were expecting to grow your business. So I'm going to open up to the floor now that you've heard the numbers. And I didn't know these numbers in advance, so I didn't put this together knowing that they would all match up. But that just shows you like roughly the size of business that feels right at that stage. Can we get some questions on the chat going? And I can see a few people's faces. So Richie, Julian, I think, is it Andy? I can't see your name up there. There's a few people on the screen, but we've also got people in the room. So please throw some questions our way. And while we wait for those to come in, unless we've got some immediately, I might ask the next one, you, and then let's... and Rich, you've mentioned that you don't have overseas, that your whole team's based over here. But Ewan, what was the thing that made you pull the trigger on investing in the US? Because we've heard from other founders before, it's expensive. You've got different tax you have to register for. There's a lot of setup costs, and actually you can do quite a lot of business from the UK. So what was all of the decision making behind that, and how much investment versus return are you currently getting from that?
Good question. So it's quite an easy answer as well. We basically, for the past 4 years, and this is relevant to the whole topic of playing it lean, for the past 4 years, from a marketing and sales perspective, we have just played the field and tried to sell Willow to any country. So we've never really said, let's just sell in the UK or let's just sell in the US. My background is digital marketing, and I just basically have been chasing where's the cheapest lead. And we've been doing that for 4 years to try and find the cheapest lead. And for us, the cheapest and most and highest converting lead has been in the US. It's just bubbled up to the top. So it might cost slightly more to acquire them, but they're converting higher. And that's resulted in 65% of our revenue today coming from the US market. And that's having, been based here for that entire period of time. So to your point, you can sell in the US without physically being there, or without having any infrastructure or anything. Like, we literally have nothing. We've never, I've actually only personally been to the US once, and it was like last month. So I've never even been to the US until last month. And that was for a conference for Willow. But yeah, I guess to kind of give you the decision-making process, it was, let's play the field, see where our customers are, but not only see where they are, where can we afford to acquire more of them? Because we might find loads of customers in the UK and gone, great, that's cool, loads of customers are here, let's sell to more of them. But they might be really expensive. So we kind of played the field to see where are they cheapest, where do they convert the most? And then over the past few years as well, where have they stuck around and not churned the most? And again, it's been the US market. We've tried in Europe, so we've been quite heavy in Germany, France, Spain, Italy over the past few years as well. And we've managed to acquire customers there, but we don't retain customers there. And a large part of that is down to the language barrier. We're not very good at speaking to those customers in their native language. They get frustrated maybe because they can't read our support docs, their emails, we don't translate our emails and things. So yeah, the US kind of came to the top, bubbled to the top over that period. to the point where 65% of that revenue is coming from there. And then we decided, let's start to invest more heavily in there. So we started investing at the start of this year, just more in marketing, more in sales efforts. We adjusted our our website, so it's actually all American English rather than UK English now. Lots of little things, but it has moved us from being a UK business to a US business in terms of look and feel. And that's been quite key to the move. And it's just been in a response, again, to this whole thing, in a response to our customers. So rather than us deciding, we want customers in the US, we're going to go after the US, we let the customer really tell us. And it was just, you know, responding to where they were and what they wanted. And then we started to shift and move things around.
That's great. And there's a couple of points I'd love to pick up on there. One is that you said that 65% of your revenues from there. What's your retained revenue from there? Is the percentage higher because of the retention?
That's right. Yeah. So churn is slightly lower in the US market. It's higher in Europe. I'm trying to give you, I probably don't have stats on top of my head that are broken down regionally, but anecdotally, I can tell you that it's a lower churn in the US. One of the reasons for the lower churn in the US is the way that they pay. So they're almost all credit cards, and credit cards we see, you know, monthly or annual credit card payments going through. Whereas in the UK, they're more invoices, and invoices, unfortunately, when you send them out, sometimes that's a trigger point for cancellation, or they just don't get paid. Like we have one at the moment that's like 6 months overdue in the UK, which is really frustrating. Whereas we don't really do any invoicing in the US at all. It's all credit card payments, which does help with churn.
That's really interesting one there. And then the second part of that then is that, so churn in Europe was higher, one, because of language barriers. So instead of, so the decision there was it low hanging fruit in that the investment to invest in a US lead was going to give higher returns than investing in localization for European languages and product relevance?
Yeah, there when you look at it on, like, if you look at one project, so say we want to go into France and do a localization project in France, that's fine. You can kind of work through it. You've got like a few different bits and pieces. You might want to hire someone that speaks French and things. But then that sort of opened us up to this world of, okay, cool, what happens to Germany's next? Do we have to do all that again? And then do we have to do it when Spain becomes the next one? And it was just like huge amounts of work that would kind of build in a lot of extra work for us. So we decided, let's stick with what we do, what we know, which is English speaking. It's so much easier from a people perspective, but also from a tech perspective. So that was one of the driving decisions behind that.
That's great. So localization.
Another point actually, just to add to that though as well. We were fundraising last year for the US expansion. So that was our hook for investment last year was, hey, if you invest in Willow, we're going to be expanding heavily in the US in 2023, 24. That's more lucrative and sexy for investors for sure. That was one of the other reasons.
Then localization for the European market.
Yeah.
And you're looking at different investors at those points, aren't you? So localization being how you address your product to be locally relevant. And sometimes that can be like it needs to read right to left instead of left to right, that certain colors don't work. There's also, but language being one, like translation and having a really effective translation. And there's lots of things that localization can mean at that point. So I feel like the lesson out of that is knowing your stats, like when you're looking at markets, and you need to know your data based on how your product's performing, what your cost of acquisition of customer is, what your churns are, like all those data points are the things that help you make effective decisions about starting to invest and continuing to be lean, but investing in areas. Is that the summary? Yeah. Excellent.
Absolutely.
We've got some questions on the chat, so I'll move to that one and ask it someone else. So Majesh in Edinburgh asked a question earlier. Okay, yeah. So what do you, so we were talking about sales earlier. So what do you do when you are selling a software solution that does powerful automation? This might be for you, David, to follow up. Powerful automation, but someone in the organization is afraid that all their manual work becomes obsolete and they might lose their job or lose an importance in their existing work effort being wasted. That's an objection to the sales possibility. And actually, Rich and you, well, Rich having experience in sales as well, but both of you having software that does remove some of the manual need in an organization as well in the hiring process. But David, if we come to you first on a thought on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you obviously you have to, it's good to recognize that as a potential objection, but you really, we talked about this afternoon how you have to sort of tune into what do the people who are the decision makers get out of using your product. Now, clearly, if somebody sees it as it does my job better than I do it, and I'm going to be out of a job, then obviously that's not a great position to start from. So you have to explain how there will be a personal win in using the product for that individual. So, it becomes a productivity tool. So it's not about doing the job better than them. It's allowing them to do more, get more work done, if you like. So positioning it as something that will help them be more effective in what they do, not putting the tool in and saying, okay, you used to take 4 hours to do this, and now it takes 4 minutes. But rather that 4 minutes means you can now do a lot more of these tasks in the same amount of time. So it doesn't need to result in that. We can discuss Elon Musk's view on working later on, but I think that it's a question of trying to understand what is in it for that individual, and showing how you're proposing a productivity tool for them, rather than a way of, so they move on to a different role, if you like, more of a manager of the automation rather than the implementer.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they become more powerful as a result of using this solution. That's the way you have to change it. So it's a question of how you present that solution, and whether you present that solution as, a productivity tool or automating something that's done manually today.
So it's thinking much more about your value proposition and how you're trying to frame it.
Exactly.
So that's looking at actually, well, all companies should be trying to be more efficient and more profitable. That's how we think they should think.
Yes.
And it's finding the way to frame that for them.
There should be ways for people in the organization to grow through the acquisition of these kinds of tools. And that's the way you should present it.
Yeah, we run a version of these programs for the Ministry of Justice to increase the efficiency of law tech in the UK. And that's a big challenge we have there, that most lawyers are paid per the minute or per 7 minutes. And so by saying we're going to reduce the number of minutes that you can bill for, they go, oh, hang on a second. It's like, well, no, you could do higher value work where you get double the fee because you can focus all your time on the high value stuff. And it's trying to pitch that sale in the right way.
Yeah.
Rich, do you have thoughts based on what your software does and how it reduces time?
I do, and I think in terms of the value prop is obviously important, and obviously having your key messaging. But I think it's not been naive in the sales process. There's usually, any software sales, there's usually 8 people involved in the buying process, minimum. So there's usually 3 personas. There's a champion, kind of what they are described as. There's a resource, and there's a blocker. And there's usually multiple of them and out of those kind of average of 8. So if you're just identifying one person and you're like, right, that could be, you're dead already, right? You've got to be like, who are the key people involved in this whole process? Like what is the CEO saying? You might not need to get to the CEO, but what is the key things that's what's in the report, what is getting posted in socials, what do they care about? Align your messaging to that. And then being able to be able to identify who the key people are. So it's like, right, well, you just identified a blocker, right? Cool. So at least you know who the blocker is. Who's going to be your champion? Who's going to get that blocker? Because you ain't going to sell that blocker. So if you try and just be the person who just, I'm going to change their mind, again, it's a waste of time. Who's your champion that can overrule them? And then who are the potential blockers down the line? Procurement are always going to be one. So it's like, how do you get ahead of them? So I think it has been very, very clear that there are multiple buyers in the cycle. And then I think the other thing is always when you get to yes, and that person said, yeah, I want to buy your solution, you always got to remember your job is only 20% done, because the bit that comes after that, yes, is the hard bits, right? As I said, procurement, contracts, invoicing, onboarding, like all of that stuff is very difficult. So I think just going into the sales process, really, really clear about who's who and how you deal with everyone, because every deal I've ever seen, if you're selling to one person and it's a relatively, if it's a mid to large company, you ain't going to win that deal. So I think it's just been clear about the roles and personas, and that's what I work with my sales team. What are they? How they're a resource, which is somebody who's going to help you, but they're not a decision maker. A champion is what you need, right? Decision maker, economic buyer, and likes what you do. If you can get that, then you're onto something.
Brilliant. It's like you actually sat through the workshop earlier as well. So I think David's quite happy that you're repeating a lot of the things we've
I've
covered.
not seen actually the details from that, so that's good.
And for the references that Rich makes, there's a book called Disciplined Entrepreneurship that's got some of the themes in, and they also talk about beachhead markets and that part of attacking.
Also read the book Challenge Yourself. If you read one book on sales, read the book Challenge Yourself.
Challengers. There'll be a reference, resource reference for us as well. Thank you. We've got a question in the chat, which is, so hopefully that answered your question, but feel free to add some follow-up if there's bits of it we didn't cover. From, where am I? Richie. So Richie's software for recruitment, it's for finding candidates. I think I've summarized that okay, but Richie's better at describing it. So which stage was the startup app for your first round of investment? Looking at specific numbers around revenue, users and things. So we've got Willow, January 2020 launch with funding in 2021, I think. And then and then Gigged, we've got launch in July 2021 with funding a few months later. And there's a longer story for you in terms of that. So maybe we go to you first, Ewan, on where you were at when you took that first funding tranche.
So I was always of the mind before fundraising. As I said, I was totally new to fundraising until our first round, and I went into it quite blind. But I went into it with this mindset that I couldn't ask anyone for money until we were making money, and that was like a real like chip on my shoulder. I was like, I just can't go up to investors and ask for investment. So we had about £1,000 of monthly recurring revenue at that point. I think we had about 30, maybe 25 customers, and then £1,000 of monthly recurring revenue coming in before we raised our first round. And that gave me just the confidence to go out and ask people for investment. And
so how much did you raise off of £1,000 monthly?
250,000.
Cool. And then the next round, so you've raised 3 million in total. What was the next round? Was a similar size?
Next round was 1 million roughly.
So bigger. And what numbers were you at that point?
Good question. I think we were at about 150 customers, maybe 200 customers by that point, and about 25,000, 30,000 of monthly recurring.
Cool. That's great. And Rich?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say in funding is like start with the end in mind. Like only 1% of startups ever get funding. Don't think that you need funding. So we started with end in mind. We had a 5-year plan. So from July 2021, we want to exit this business, grow a really vibrant business in Scotland, hopefully help the startup community as we grow. But we want to, our view is within 5 years, this business we're out and we're going to sell it to an Accenture, a Deloitte, or one of the large staffing firms. So we always had the view that this is about pace. This company, this is not a lifestyle business. This is pace, right? So we went into that. So we chose to raise money because of that, right? If we weren't going to try and move at that pace, we wouldn't have raised money. We would have bootstrapped it, because raising money, like me and you are only 20, 22 years old, right? Look at us, because we're not. But funding is hard, right? It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's probably the hardest thing you ever. It's a pain. So we decided to do it. We had no revenue. We had 300 users, I think, at best. We had literally nothing apart from a bit of a vision and a good, strong founding team that were committed. So we were a bit kind of seat of our pants, right? But it was very much like, we're going to do this. And it was really me selling me, and that, hey, look, if you give me this money, I'll deliver. Which is obviously it's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. So we had nothing. We did not have anything when we first raised. Literally hardly had a product. We had an MVP, but it was WordPress with a Typeform build in, so it was pretty crap. But yeah, so that was the route we took, and then we were able to go. But we were always of the view, we are a VC backed firm. We're going to move quick, and we're going to try and exit big, and we're going to do that within 5 years. So that would be the key for me, is like, don't think you just need to go and raise money, because you don't. But it depends what you want out of your business.
And I think, yeah, we covered that. It's a really great point. A few weeks ago, we did a panel on pivots, failures, and exits with exited founders, thinking about what the end point looks like and what you're trying to actually achieve, and that actually there's different directions that you might take based on what you want the end goal or your ultimate to be. So you raised 800,000 with 300 users, no revenue. Is that what the number that correlates? Yeah, cool. So for context, we raised 300,000 with no revenue, but with users. We were a marketplace business as well. We were 6 months old at that point. Well, 6 months old to get our first failed angel round, and 9 months when we closed our 300,000 round. And that was back in March 2016. So probably a bit further back in the history of startup funding landscape. But again, for us, it was about proving that we had users interacting with the site, and that we had built a base of a group that were targeted, and that we knew how we were going to grow that, and that we had a revenue model built in, and that the funding for us was to build in the product to enable transactions to take place on our site. Whereas at that time, we were just tracking conversations and trying to invoice manually where we saw something close, which was much harder. But at least we had some proof that people were using and finding utility in what we'd built as an MVP. And we built the MVP, I think, with 30K. Not just built the MVP, but managed the first 9 months of the business growth with 30K. Last round of funding you took, or do you want to go back earlier? Which one's more relevant to the numbers that you've been sharing, I think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I don't know how much the funding's changed since the early 2000s when we started, but we raised the first 2 rounds without any revenue. It was a very deep technical product that we were developing, which might have been a problem, but anyway, but we had a concept of what we wanted to build, and we knew how to build it, and we had customers who said they were interested, but obviously they hadn't, we had references of people who said, yeah, if these guys could do this, we would definitely be interested in it. Although obviously they didn't part with any money at that point, and we needed a team of, I think, 7 or 8 people to build this. So we actually raised 300K angel funding to put the team in place, which gave us an MVP. And then we brought in a VC. We raised 1.2 million after that, still with no revenue. But obviously the customers were then able to access the MVP, and the 1.2 million allowed us to complete that and actually start generating some revenue from it. But I mean, it depends. I think it depends a little bit on what kind of businesses you've got and how much expensive resource you need to build that MVP. And also, it may well be that the market has moved on a bit since those days, and people are a bit more hard-nosed about, raising money or giving money without seeing revenue first.
Yeah, I mean, the last 18 months have definitely proved more challenging. I think it's the consideration that investment unlocks something rather than just adds to your runway, and that you need to know exactly what you're planning to unlock with that investment and how you're going to make it happen. And it's just that it sounds like Rich has got a really recent experience of pitching the no revenue story to investors and what that's going to unlock. But I think it's still possible to raise with no revenue, but it's you need to have a really good investor relationship that you also need
people that they believe can actually deliver what you're saying, because obviously at that point they're funding an unknown because they don't actually know whether you can build it. So I think the team comes into it at that point as well.
There was a follow-up question from something Ewan said, I think, in there. Oh, it's at the top of the screen now. From Julie, who's also working on something that's in HR recruit tech space around emotional intelligence testing and development. And Ewan said that he spent a lot of time on R&D initially. Was this pre-funding? Were you working elsewhere at this point too? How did you fund this phase? And how did you find your first customers in the research phase? There might be a bigger question in there about R&D as well. I don't know how much people know about R&D tax credits and how you frame your R&D, but if we go to Ewan first to answer that directly about how you did it at Willow, and then I'd love to get thoughts from David and Rich as well.
Yeah, of course. So to answer the first part of the question, pre-funding or not, it was pre-funding. So that was 2018 and 2019. I did R&D. And to fund that period, Julie, I started my own digital marketing agency. So I was in full-time employment for another startup. And this is my fourth startup. And the previous startup was a car finance company. And I was in that organization and I was like, I really want to do something else. I want to start Willow. But I couldn't see any way of physically doing it. I was working like 8 till 6 every single day, including weekends and stuff. It was like, I had no time to do anything else other than that business. And that was fair enough. I wanted to be fully invested. So I ended up having to stop that business. I just like left that business and started a digital marketing agency with the mind that I could actually flex that around other staff. So I ran this agency for 2 years, so 18 and 19. And in that time, slowly built up more and more Willow days. Obviously, those days I wasn't making any money, but I was comfortable that I was getting closer and closer to having something of value and building this startup on the side. So yeah, I had maybe like 13 or 14 clients in the marketing agency, and that allowed me to fund, like mortgage and all the bills and all that boring stuff, and at the same time have a little bit of money to fund those days off where I was essentially working on Willow. And then when it comes to the actual R&D itself, my R&D mostly consisted of playing around in Sketch at the time and Balsamic and making wireframes, and then going into Starbucks on Barrows Road and sitting down with people. I used to just like put on it was on Gumtree mostly, like Gumtree user experience. I'll buy you a coffee or give you £10 if you meet me in Starbucks on like this period of time. And then people would come to Starbucks and sit upstairs in that Starbucks on Barrows Road. And I would just like click through wireframes on my laptop and get their feedback on these wireframes, because I was wanting to speak to candidates essentially, so real people in the market that were looking for jobs. That was the criteria, and if they had a good experience, applying for a job on Willow, then I was onto something. So that was my R&D. It was essentially 2 years of talking to candidates in Starbucks, and then used my marketing agency to basically fund that time period.
So did the marketing agency fund any outgoings that you had for testing Willow as a concept, or was it just to fund you?
They actually bootstrapped the MVP.
Cool. And then you mentioned, on that note, then you mentioned that you never, is Andrew your co-founder?
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
at Willow?
yeah.
You never met him in person. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so our wives, his wife was friends with me in university, and I was looking for a co-founder. As a lot of people maybe on this call are, I was like, I need a co-founder because I can't do all this on my own, and I'm also not very good at selling. And so I basically knew of Andrew through his wife, and just said, are you interested in this? And like pitched the business basically to him. It was really weird. I did it over like a bunch of beers and on my laptop. It was like a horrible little presentation I made. Had a couple of beers and then pitched this business idea, and then. He actually, long story short, but he liked the idea so much he wanted to do it himself. And then he went and told Hannah, I'm going to do this idea on my own. And then he came back and actually said, no, let's do it together. So we started it together that way.
Thank you. Rich, do you want to expand on the R&D phase and how you funded that early bit? And then I don't know if either of you have used, or any of you have used R&D tax credits, and share a bit about what you can do with those.
Yeah, well, so the first bit, so we put in five grand each as ourselves, just to savings to kind of get at least ready to go and raise. So to create that kind of WordPress, get something basic built. The first kind of 12 to 18 months, we pretty much spent all our money on products. So we got 100 grand from Innovate UK. There's about 150 grand from Scottish Enterprise as well. All of that money has been spent on the product, all of it. And I would say that pretty much the 800K we raised pre-seed was all built on building the tech. So we literally spent a lot of time building the technology, and ours, we didn't maybe do the traditional of like build small. We just went and built and we knew what we were going to build, and we just went and built it. And again, I wouldn't suggest everybody does that, but we were very focused. I'd been at Gartner for 2.5 years in product, advising on these products. So we knew what we were trying to build. So we just went and built it. And then, yeah, we've used R&D tax credits. I think we've got about 100 grand back. I think maybe more than that, which we've used. So yeah, we use that a lot through Johnson Carmichael, and Amplify do that for us. Works pretty well. I don't get too involved. It's my CTO who does all of the pain around the interviews. It is quite painful around the time, I think, but thankfully it doesn't hit my desk. But yeah, we've used that pretty well. We focused on building the tech team in Glasgow. We decided very early on, our first hires were developers, product managers, data science. We really focused on building that first, and then I became the sales guy really, and focused and found our sales for probably 12 months before we brought in a salesperson.
So there's two different experiences there on what you mean by R&D, one being the actual tech product and one being the research with customers and the utility of it with your target customers. And there's like two bits those are definitely the two bits you have to focus on at that early stage. R&D tax credits or R&D as a process, how have you funded it? And
well, we've used R&D tax credit very effectively for several years. I think it's probably the best way of making your money last a bit longer, and it's relatively painless if you've got an accountant that knows what they're doing. There are a lot of companies out there that will offer to do it for you, and some of them, from what I understand, are not very good. So you have to be a bit careful about who you get. You need to get somebody to help you do it. I think trying to do it on your own would be madness. But equally, there's good ways and bad ways to do it. And I understand that it's got much more complicated in the last year because there's been some fraud issues with it. So it's probably even more complicated than it was before, but it's certainly worth doing. And if you're doing pure R&D where there's intellectual property being created, then you will qualify for it. And I think it's 35% of your R&D costs, I think.
Yeah, I don't know I haven't done it since early 2022, I think was the last claim I would have done for it. And we went through seed legals who have 100% success rate. So they won't even take you on if they don't think that you've got something that's got a suitable claim. It's essentially the government productizes your R&D process so that you can claim tax deducting. So if you were revenue generating or profitable, you would reduce your tax bill based on that, whereas a lot of people actually get a grant back if you're not generating profit and you're in the loss, then you get money back from the government, which is something you will never get easily. So make the most of it. Most tech, if you're building proprietary tech or proprietary software, then you will likely have a claim. But as you said, get advice. I think Rich, you mentioned Johnson Carmichael, who are a Scottish-based accountancy and legal practice, aren't they? If I've got that right.
Yeah, accountancy. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a link there to someone locally if you want, or Seed Legals, who we've mentioned a few times in different panels. Someone that I've used and would definitely recommend. And then the other part of that, I guess, is if you're thinking about this in running lean, the other financial system to use is your director's loan account. So Rich, that sounds like you'll put 5K in each, which would be in your director's loan account, which can come out later to you as basically you can just return the money to yourself later on without it being classed as income. So you don't have to take, or I'm not an accountant, so don't take my advice. But it's essentially make sure you're using that part of your accounting system. And we had that session with Sophie last week on management accounts. And so there's a director's loan account that will sit in your management accounts if you've put money into the business that you can, but you have to record that as a director's loan. Investors can be a bit funny about director's loans sometimes if they're accruing. You might have seen on Dragon's Den. I don't know if anyone's got experience of that they want to share.
Yeah, when we done the second round, the deal, or first round, sorry, was that we would pay those directors' loans back with part of the round. They didn't want them staying in the business. So I think we were happy to keep it in and take it back. Again, there was no accruing interest or anything. I think it's 5K and we get 5K back. I wouldn't try and do anything else in that. But yeah, when we done the pre-seed, the deal was we don't want any directors' loans in this business now. Take it out. And we did. So it wasn't like a really long loan. We were willing to keep it in. But yeah, that's the way we done it. So I think we put 5K in like May, and then we got it back in I think October, November. So yeah, that's how. And I think most VCs are relatively consistent with that. If you have a director's loan, they want it kind of just cleared off before they transfer you any funds as part of due diligence.
Yeah, and thinking about it's not just necessarily cash, but if you're like paying for WordPress or other things from your own personal account, you can, as long as you've got the record of it, you can talk to your accountant. Don't listen to me. Is my summary. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I'd love to get like a parting comment from everyone. I think we've had a couple of questions still in there, so we might ping them to the relevant people afterwards and just get an answer. Or if you can see them in the chat and you want to answer any panelists, then please go ahead. I'd love to know your most expensive mistake and your best cost saving / lean tip. Oh, everyone's got a thinking face on, but David's smiling, so we'll come to you.
Thanks. Most expensive mistake. That's a good question. I think I did at one time invest in a number of lead generation services, including some customization of those. This was maybe 5 years ago when we were just getting into the SaaS business, and I thought that, I recognized the fact that, inbound was going to be the way we were going to make money. And with no sales force to speak of, I thought I'll invest in lead generation services, which I did. And I tried a couple of different companies. I tried my best to qualify them and speak to references and all the rest of them, but they were both hopeless. And I think it was just because of the kind of product that we had. We were selling to engineers, and I think it doesn't really work too well with them because, of course, what happens with these services is they end up, sending out lots of emails as sort of cold calling emails. And I think that none of us like getting those emails, but I think deep engineers are certainly a class of people who really hate those kind of emails. So I think that was quite an expensive thing that I wish I hadn't done. In terms of ways to save money, I think probably it was to not invest in salespeople, because I definitely didn't do that, and I think it probably would have been a mistake. I actually saw too many other small companies hire salespeople early on. And of course, the one thing you can be sure of that salespeople do well is sell themselves. So they tend to be quite successful in getting the gig, but then generally don't deliver what they promised. So I think that I saw a lot of companies doing that and ending up with salespeople who disappointed them, and then it was expensive to get rid of them and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that what we did was we invested in technical support people. So tried to create, smart people who were technical, but also had good understanding of the sales process. I wasn't asking them to be salespeople. I was asking them to hold the hand of the customer through the process. And I would kind of oversee the sales process. And I found that was probably a more effective use of the cash that we had.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Ewan or Rich, who wants to go first on the screen?
Ewan, you go first.
I'll go first. Really relevant to what we just spoke about. We hired an inexperienced R&D accountant in year one. That was the most expensive mistake because they messed up the application and ended up, we didn't get to claim any of those R&D credits from year one because the accountant we used wasn't very experienced or very good. And there's obviously pretty good life lessons in there. Don't pay too cheaply. So in future, we've used much more experienced R&D specialists rather than trying to save money on certain things. I think just saving money on people in general has been a good lesson for me over the years. Like whether it's lawyers, accountants, salespeople, anything like that, you don't want to pay cheaply because paying cheaply for people results in poor results typically. So yeah, R&D year one, that really stung us.
And then, so you're saying your best, then what would be your best spend or your best way lean tip for what you've done?
Yeah, best lean tip is just to apply for all of the startup credits and all the grants that you can possibly get your hands on. We've never paid AWS a penny. We've never paid Stripe any fees, and we're in year 4. I think we've racked up a bill of like $500,000 with AWS. We've never paid a penny of it, just because we keep applying for more and more activator grants and startup grants and stuff. It takes time, but when you weigh it up, you're like 5 hours of my time for like, I don't know, £100,000, totally worth it. So just like suck it up and apply for all the stuff that you can, including all like the Glasgow City Council grants and stuff. On like 5 minutes to like get £1,000. Yeah, cool. You're not going to get that any other way, so you might as well do it.
Just to add to that, the Data Lab have a service that nobody knows about, which if you write a grant, they'll review it for you and they'll critique it. As long as you're a Scottish company, a tech company, they will review it. A guy called Adam runs it. So our first grants were always rejected because they were crap, because I wrote them. Then he rewrote them and critiqued them, and then we got every grant after that. We've never not got a grant after that. So it's a free service, so I would definitely use it. Data Lab funding service is called.
Brilliant. Data Lab, was it?
Data Lab.
Data Lab. And on that, remember, you're being sold to by the people that you're buying software or services from, so you can haggle as well. Like it's a negotiation. You're not like if you turn your nose up to their price, the conversation doesn't end. It works both ways, right, David?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. And Rich, any further top tips for you? Biggest,
our biggest waste, Google Ads.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of money on ad spend. When we've done our first round, we brought in a kind of sexy agency, and I'm scared to say we spent a lot of money on ad spend thinking that would really build, but we didn't really have the ICP right. So that was a total waste of money, which I still lose sleep about. Best thing for us was the biggest spend of any business is your people, right? If you look at any spend, it's always going to be people. We took an approach that we would always hire fractional freelance first. And then if that had to then be converted or hire permanent, we would. But, software development product, our CFO is still fractional. We've never hired a full-time CFO, still 1 day up, 2 days a week, sorry. So yeah, we've just always been like fractional first. Like UX designer is going to be a hire we're going to make, but we've had a UX designer freelance for the last 2 years. So it's just don't jump to make those perm hires too quick, because it's hard to get rid of that spend. David was saying, if you got a bad salesperson, it's hard to get rid of people, and it does suck the soul out of your business, and it also sucks the soul out of you, because sacking people ain't nice, right? And it also does have an impact on your business. If you've let somebody go and then they're on LinkedIn posting about your business, bad stuff, that gets around, right? You just got to be careful. So our play was, unless we can't do it fractionally, then we'll hire perm. But that was our focus, and it worked really well, and we still do that to this day. Like everybody we bring on, first of all, it's a UX, whatever, freelance, and then if we're like, no, we couldn't live without that, we need it full time, then we'll go full time. But yeah, we're very careful about making too many hires.
Brilliant. And that's linked so well to some of the other things that have come up in previous panels. So people saying that their hardest failures were around people and having to get rid of people. And also when we did the Growing Your Team Week, for everyone, remember the HR rules and restrictions around IR35, hiring people, contracts, etc. When you take on Rich's advice and thinking
just
about
get AI and they'll sort out the IR35.
And then the other thing being around not expanding too quickly and thinking strategically about what you want. That's come up quite a few times in topics that we've covered. So everything seems to link quite nicely together. Massive thank you to you all. We've run slightly over, but wanted to get those last passing passing thoughts. Really appreciate you joining us, Ewan and Rich. We'll see you next week, Rich, in person. We'll see you, Ewan, again, I'm sure, at some point. And thank you, David, for joining us in person for both the workshop and for the panel. And I will hand back to Claire for thoughts on next week, I think, is where we're going. Any questions that weren't covered, we will try and crowdsource you some answers, but I don't want to go too late.
Nice, thank you. Right, so as always, just some events that we're recommending coming up in the near future. We will be popping these onto the community platform as always, so you don't need to take any notes just now, and we'll put all the details that you need for them. And then for next week, I think I've been nagging people slightly, and I may well start messaging people directly. So if you would like to be really helpful and avoid me having to pester you, please use this QR code. Erin will be popping the link into the chat. But let us know if you are planning on coming along in person next week. We are working pretty hard on making sure there's going to be lots of people in the room that you'll want to talk to. So as long as we have accurate numbers, then we can use the space for inviting some others. But there's going to be some of our partners there, and we'll have a number of investors and funders. We've invited along speakers from the sessions so far, and it's just going to be a really nice opportunity to get together and celebrate together, as well as having our final batch of content. So I would encourage you to reflect on the last 9 weeks, because we're going to have a founders panel there for you, which will be a bit of a loose Q&A for you to ask anything that you're keen to know. So yeah, that's what I would kind of recommend for coming along prepared. We're going to have 6 people or 6 companies pitching from the participants right now, and also the panel with those investors, and lots of opportunities to chat with each other. Also, let us know if you are going to be joining from home, because we will try to make tailor some activities for the people that cannot make it along in person. But again, I have mentioned that if the cost of travel is something that's stopping you from coming along in person, then please get in touch, because this is something that we can help with. Obviously, we know that the travel isn't going to be the only barrier, so we are still going to be having that online option. It'll still be hybrid as usual, and I am very excited about everything happening at the Everyman, and we'll make sure that there's plenty of refreshments for the day as well. And as I mentioned, if you are going to be joining week 10 remotely, definitely do not want you to feel like you're being forgotten. So please let us know if you would like to receive a little goodie bag. This is basically just going to include some of the stuff that will be there for people who are joining in person on the day. But we have to do pretty quick turnaround with this, so you'll see that I've not even given you 24 hours to let me know. So please do this now if you would like a bag, because we need to figure out we need to sort out the logistics for getting them posted to you and getting packed up and everything. So that's why it's quite a short turnaround for you. But yeah, just so that you can feel part of the whole experience, and it's not just for those in person. And that's us for week 9. Thank you very much to all of our panelists and to David for the workshop. And we will see you next week, either at the Everyman in Glasgow or online. Thank you so much, everyone.